Can I just have a quick question? How many of you use ultrasound in some kind of way in your daily work or in your practice training? So almost everybody, half more, yeah. Great. Makes it a bit easier. Just a few words. I'm gonna show you some commercial stuff. I'm not paid by anybody of the guys behind this, so I used to work together with GE back in the days, but not being paid by them. And in the program it says PhD, but I'm still working on it, so it's a bit of a hassle, so I'm not there yet. Okay, my topic will be, I'm gonna take you through the evidence from the last 5 years to ultrasound, because we've been using it for years now, and the evidence is lacking, and critics are saying you can't use, why you use the stuff that's not proven to work. So we made a review of the last things, only focusing on pre-hospital. The high altitude medicine, it's just a very few publications, so it's not included here. I'm going to try to show you some new stuff, so maybe some future things, and I'm going to give a brief introduction to a project we are having now, where we use ultrasound in diagnosing acute myocardial infarctions. So feel free to interrupt me and ask questions if it's something in the way. Just a brief history. This should maybe be, ultrasound maybe should be retired already, because it's a long time. But I'm showing you this timeline because interventions coming, and then they start using it, and then you make the evidence. So it's the same here for us now. This around 2010, well, 1996 was the first publication of pre-hospital use in English. There was some French publications before that. So it's slowly evolving, and the units are getting more and more handy and suited for our use. And you all know the use. You can use it for almost everywhere. You can make diagnostics quite accurate. You can aid your if you have interventions, if you want to put lines or something, you can see inside the body. And you can also, it's highly useful also during transport. So you can use it in helicopters, and you can also use it on the road ambulance and on the road. So you don't have to waste the patient's time by making examinations on the place. Okay, for the evidence part, we made a review. It's not been published yet. We followed the Sign 50 guidelines, scoring the publications. And the normal 1% of what you find is what you're going to include. So we only found 27 articles for the last 5 years on the topic of pre-hospital ultrasound. So this is mostly, the work has been led by a colleague in Denmark, Morten, and other colleagues joined. So to make it a bit more view, I'm going to take you really quickly through the evidence. So put into four marks here. So on cardiac arrest, it's to use ultrasound on cardiac arrest patients. It shows to be highly feasible. So if you do it, people that take the images, it's easy to manage it. A British study showed that when you see the heart is completely still, you have asystole and you also see the heart is still, then you have a predictive value for death, which is really high. This is quite logical. When the heart is still, you're dead, but it shows that its correlation is proven. Unfortunately, when the paramedics in Britain did this, they exceeded the 10-second breaks on the CPR. So it was median 17 seconds. So of course, more experienced people might be improving this. Usually we can do ultrasound in 2-3 seconds if you do a quick loop, and you can review it later. But it may be methodological, but that was shown. And also was shown that paramedics, they are able to discriminate between the standstill heart and the beating heart. Okay, then to the pulmonary. I didn't find a good pulmonary picture. I know we have some issues with smoking in Austria, with on the cafes and restaurants, right? So it's everywhere. So you have to do something with rules. That's a different topic. But on the pulmonary studies, it was a Danish study of acceptable quality. When you have B-lines, well, if you don't have B-lines and you have dyspnea, is it really likely no B-lines and dyspnea? Then it's highly likely not to be pulmonary edema, so congestive heart failure. So its negative predictive value is really high. You understand what I said? Yeah. So no B-lines in dyspnea, probably not congestive heart failure. But if you find, and if you don't find pleural effusion, then it's also highly unlikely congestive heart failure. The positive predictive value, seeing B-lines, and B-lines here is defined 3 or more B-lines in one image, bilateral. Then you have, it's probably, more probably than tossing a coin, it's the congestive heart failure is the cause of the dyspnea. What they also found that doing the ultrasound imaging, you change the management in maybe 1 out of 4 patients. Was also one study, unfortunately, was not designed so well, so we had to reject it, but they used ultrasound to monitor CPAP. So we were putting the positive pressure on, and the lines were disappearing, and the patient were improving. But the methodological design of the study made that it was not possible to include it into the review. Okay, so not much yet. About HEMS patients, trauma and medical patients. Ketelaars in the Dutch study from 2013 of acceptable quality found out that what the pre-hospital doctors find correlates quite well with the in-hospital diagnosis. And it changed the treatment in quite a few. And change in treatment, that was mostly abstaining thoracic drains. So not so often you do something, but you refrain from doing something you used to do. So maybe some harmful interventions. So also here, not much. Unfortunately, also here we had a Canadian study, quite a lot of patients, but there was methodological problems to include this because it was too highly risk of bias. Okay, so sorry, it's not so much evidence to prove the use. It's not. So we need, so if any of you want to do research, it's on outcome. It's really, really needed outcome studies where we put ultrasound in. You don't have to look on mortality because that will be probably impossible, but you have to look on some kind of outcome measure in the future. So it's been a couple of studies now since we finished the study. A German study on non-ST elevation infarction, also a new Dutch study showing something, but it was not included here. But on education, it's a lot, and the evidence, it's fairly good. So to sum up the 11 good studies, we conclude that you have to combine theory, hands-on training, and also you have to do some kind of examination. And also you have to have supervision for the training. And it should be more than 50 examinations before you're confident. So, education and teaching, it's highly important. It's, as everybody is that criticize ultrasound say it's really user-dependent, but you just have to. It's dependent on knowledge, and you have to put it into the context. So ultrasound is like all kinds of all the sides of medicine. You have to have a good platform to improve your teaching and learn from your mistakes and good things. And the way to do that, of course, congresses and big venues are fine. But you also have to have more, especially when you're in remote places, You need something to back you up and to make you more confident of your use. So we have had quite good experience using video, some kind of video transfer where you can have the ultrasound pictures, the video of the patient, and also some interactions. So we have been using a Canadian program called React. But even better is if you use something that's already inside the system you have. This is called TRICE. So it's included in the Sonosite and probably also the GE machines being sold now. So if you manage to set this up, you can have the pictures on a cloud. You can review it. You can email it to your colleague, maybe to your superior colleagues, and have some discussion without the patient identification added. And it's also possible if you have a good system, you can put it into the patient charts and electronic journals. We haven't managed this yet because of regulations. It's really difficult, but we're working on it. So there's lots of different systems where you can review and store the images. So the medical legal thing, we're not too bothered with that in Norway with the lawsuits, but I think countries in Europe and Britain especially, and you have to have this really well attached before you start implementing it on national scale. And you should of course choose something that works with the systems you have inside your hospitals. So the pictures will be there for reviewing and for later use. Okay, so a lot of work to manage to do this. So what's the solution? It's maybe an app or something, right? So we have to make this easier. So in the future now, probably we will see more and more automatic and supported things. So either some toolkits or some app, some automatic measures. And some of this stuff is already on the market. So GE made this machine now where the B-lines, they can quantify it, recognize it, and also monitor it. So this will be making the use and documentation much easier. It's fairly robust, but unfortunately only available on one platform. This is just artificial intelligence. The machine can just be thought to know that if you see this and this, you count them and you give a number. So it's not really, I don't think it's so difficult to make programs like that. Similarly, for fairly advanced things like VTI and measuring of cardiac output, the machine, if you just get the image, the machine can calculate it for you. It takes down the level of knowledge needed to make quite good and advanced examinations. Also, one more thing that I think will be needed before we see the widespread use is the combination. So I don't know if anybody are familiar with Tempus Pro monitor, but you have at least it's the first one that you can just connect and probe to, and you get images on the same screen as the rest of your vital parameters. The probe is crap, but it probably be improved in the future. And also you can put what now is happening now. It's this came I think last year, Lumify. You don't have to buy it. You can just lease it, and you just plug it into some kind of Android platform or something like this, and you get really good images. Similar here, it's even without wires, so it's connected. And this is really promising. This is it's called Butterfly IQ or something. It's not been released yet, but now they changed inside ultrasound probes. It was crystals, quite difficult mechanical stuff that made the probes quite expensive and fragile. So they changed this for some semiconductors, making it cheap. So this is maybe, they say that the price should be about $2,000, 2,000 euros. So we'll see, but and really wide spectrum of frequency. But I haven't tried this. I don't know if it will hit the market. It's not been FDA accepted yet. So, but they promise it should be something in in the future. And also, I know the other companies they come with wireless probes and high multi beams, so they can do all kind of stuff, even for cardiac, pulmonary, and all parts. Okay, so the future here, it's the impact of ultrasound. It's a bit enthusiastic, and people use it for their own things, and it's just an add-on to the clinical exam. So our thought is that this should be added to what you already do to try to improve it at least a little bit. So it's really hard to make the good evidence for this. We selected a patient group, acute coronary syndromes, because it's a big group. And the coronary syndromes now, they're treated based on one single diagnostic modality, and that's ECG. So all the ECG only reveals the ST elevation infarctions. So they have like this red carpet into the PCI lab, but lots of these patients have the same disease, but they're not being accepted. They have to go through a local hospital, do the lab work, do the secondary lab work, wait for the cardiologist, and then maybe take the bus to the PCI center next day. So our objective is to take these patients here because it's like the avalanche curve. The mortality, the survival drops when time runs. So the time to treatment is critical for all these coronary syndromes. And today, patients with non-ST elevation myocardial infarctions, at my hospital, we managed to get about 70% of the patients into the PCI lab within 24 hours. But nationally, in our country, it's only 21% of the patients that get to PCI lab within the recommended European guidelines. And it's quite a common disease, and of this, maybe one fifth of this is ST elevation infarctions. So it's a big group of patients suffering. And the major hospitals, they don't manage to have the big numbers on the patients. And lots of the non-ST elevation infarction patients, they are high risk. So actually, they should be at least as fast revascularized as this ST elevation infarctions. So if you come direct to PCI, it's a chance you might get revascularized. But if you go via a secondary hospital on the way, it's not a chance you can manage to have 2-hour time. So what we tried to do, we took a regular ambulance. We selected some of the crew. It's not real paramedics, some is ambulance workers. We gave them 5 hours of ultrasound training, 2 hours of training with doing the quick troponin test from the venous blood with a Cobas machine. This is really easy available and quite cheap. And we just now looking into, we had included first 50 patients. We haven't concluded anything yet. Putting a quite high-end machine in here, taking the images of the heart. So the paramedics, they just store, and the images are available to the cardiologist in the PCI hospital immediately, and he can do quite advanced tests. So he can use these images as he made them himself. So he can do strain rate, and he can do measurements, he can do maps or taps, whatever. And also visually see if it's regional changes in the contractility. So the strain, I'm not going to go into this now, but you can. It's also a semi-automatic way of finding a regional wall, places of the regional wall where the myocardium doesn't stretch as good as it should. So we're trying out this, and it seems to be really, really high accuracy. But of course, putting a 50,000 euro ultrasound machine in an ambulance and training people, it's not feasible yet. But we hope in the future, this is now semi-automatic. It should be possible to make it automatic. Of course, you have to make it sure that it's robust, and of course you make lots of mistakes on the way, but probably in the future, things like this can help us also get this ST elevation infarction patients into the PCI lab correctly. Because you can't take them all. 80% of chest pain, it's not cardiac. So you can't just take all the patient to the center. We also see that troponins alone, it's not enough. Several of the non-ST elevation infarctions, they have really low troponins because we get to them quite early. And also not all of them have things we can see here, so probably you need a multi-modality model. The good thing is our goal is to improve from 1%, so we have a chance to maybe show something if we get some more people to PCI. Okay, it was a bit rushed, but I think I managed to keep the time. Questions later or now? Or?